Hello, this is Bill Hahn. Welcome to the IBM BPM tutorial demo series. If you'd like to see more demonstrations and get to other resources, you can go to IBMBPMDemos.com. In this tutorial demonstration, we'll be taking a look at the design segment of the full life cycle of BPM. We'll be using the Process Designer to get acclimated to how you navigate around and use the Process Designer to do dynamic design work. So let's go ahead and get started. In the Process Designer, we have a palette of BPMN, Business Process Modeling Notation shapes on the right. Among those are gateways, activities, swim lanes, and others. We can use those to draw the picture of the process, and so much more. So let's put a few shapes on here and connect them up to get an idea for how we do that. Once we have those connected up, we'll take a look at what's underneath some of these shapes and how this picture of the process is actually a process application. Let's go ahead and take a look at how this runs, because indeed you can run it at any time, no matter how much or how little has been implemented. When we press that Run button, it switches from the designer perspective to the inspector perspective, which is where we can see instances of our process running, or in this case orders running through our order fulfillment process. And here we have the create order activity highlighted in the diagram. We can go ahead and claim or run that activity, and when we do, we can see the screens that are implemented for that create order activity. So we have a number of fields, several screens in the screen flow, some live reports that give us information that helps us get our job done. We can select the vendors we want to submit the quote to. And then when we get on the last screen, we can do some interesting dynamic things here. Let's drill down into this create order activity and take a look at the screens that have been designed and actually change them on the fly. Let's move this delivery forecast to the top left and the order details from the top left to the top right. And we can go ahead and save that change and see how it works in the running process. Let's go ahead and refresh that page. We can see that it's moved. Delivery forecast used to be in the top right, and now it's moved to the top left. So we've changed it on the fly. Let's go ahead and make another dynamic change that involves taking care of some of the data in the screens as a part of the payload of the process. So I'm going to move this comment field to the bottom right corner. And let's go ahead and transition the screen so that it gets stored in the process. We can see that it's stored in the payload of the process because even though this UI control is in a completely different location of the page, it's picking up that data from the payload of the process. Let's go ahead and get back to the screen whose layout we actually did change. And now let's go ahead and move it to the bottom right corner, save that, and try out that screen, and we can see we've actually changed that on the fly. We've moved it from the middle left to the bottom right. So let's go ahead and continue this process. Display the diagram, submit this, refresh the process diagram. We can see we've progressed to the Get Vendors stage in the process. It's nicely highlighted for us. It's been farmed out to 4 different vendors because we checked those 4 lines in the vendor table to whom we want to submit the quotes or request for quote. Then we can continue processing. We can see here the screens that the vendors see so they can get an idea of the fact that if they respond more quickly, they're more likely to win the business. So let's do a few other things. We can see that this picture of the process is a lot more than just a diagram. It's actually a diagram with implementation details about how this process application will run. In the create order activity, not only is there a screen, the one we were changing, but we can see that there are services that are called as well. So that, for instance, before we get to the select vendor screen, these yellow boxes are the screens, we're going to go get a list of available vendors. That's how we got those 4 vendors in that vendor table list. And when we drill down, we can see there are multiple coaches or screens, and we can easily work with each one of them, like we were doing with the confirm screen. If we go back to the process diagram and drill down into the Get Vendor Responses activity, we can see it has several screens and a couple gray box services as well. There's that screen that we saw when we were claiming an activity for the vendor. There are other types of activities in a process or process diagram. For instance, there are business rules. Business rules can take several forms. They can be natural language or decision tables. So for instance, in this decision table we see a combination of customer, vendor, material description or product name, price, and total quantity. Different combinations of values for those are going to render different decisions. So if it's a combination in that row I've highlighted, it'll automatically reject manager approval. Or in that row, it'll automatically approve. So depending upon the combination of process data values, we're going to render a different decision in this decision table. We can also work with natural language. In other words, what happens is the process data or process variables are automatically synthesized into a business rule language. So customer, date, email, issue date, planner comments, priority. You can see they're not just process variable names anymore or data names and types. They're actually part of a natural language you can use to formulate a business rule statement. And this can be varietal, it can be logical, and it can contain the data in a way that we issue events or set new values and render some sort of a decision. So the fact that we can take the data of a process and automatically use it in the context of a business rule decision table or natural language business rule statement can be very flexible. There's other logic in this business process, like in this decision gateway. We can see in the property sheet that in the implementation section we're accessing any of the, we can actually access any of the data that's flowing through this process in this data structure tree, and by selecting any of it, in this case by selecting the status, we can decide in which cases we'll take which branch of the tree. So we can see here when the status, in other words when a manager presses the approve or the reject button, in this case the approve, it's going to take the yes branch of the tree. So we build in logic both visually and programmatically into the process diagram so that it's not just a diagram but actually a process application. This box or activity in the process isn't actually just an activity, it's a subprocess, a reusable linked subprocess. And in this case it does some straight through processing and calls out to human exception when necessary to store the order once completed in a back-end system. This particular service is actually an encapsulated service. It does a number of things: database interactions, interaction with the data warehouse, a web service call before it goes ahead and updates a back-end system of record. And we're able to include that or leverage it in our process application even though it was built by someone else. It was built by someone else in our team and is stored in an enterprise SOA services reusable module called toolkits in IBM BPM. So we can see in the process library on the left there's a number of different artifacts. We can get to all the artifacts very quickly just by typing. By typing part of the name, it'll zero in on what we might be looking for. We can visit the categories, processes and subprocesses, user interfaces and human services, all sorts of Web 2.0 capabilities, implementation, integration components and services, decision business rules, the data that we define for our process, performance reports and metrics, files, as well as the reusable modules called toolkits. So we see this Enterprise SOA Services reusable toolkit, which came from a different part of our organization, has a list of, and think of this as anything in the IT landscape can be surfaced here. So we can reuse existing new or old integrations and drag them and drop them into our process visually, wire them in programmatically, and then call them seamlessly from our process application. So we can see this service, if we drill down into it, is that service that happened to be used in another part of our process application. When we use this, we can choose between different versions, so we have seamless version control that allows us to coordinate the integration and development between teams. So if we choose version 2, we can see that was a different version that someone developed for us. If we choose version 3, we can see that that's yet another version. So as we roll out changes and in a rapid, agile, iterative fashion change this process application over time, the seamless snapshot version control makes that much easier and able to coordinate amongst different teams. We can use that same snapshot version control with the simple icon of a camera up top to version our process. So as we've made some changes to our process and drew some process elements in the upper right corner, I'm going to go ahead and version this, version 4.1, and indicate its backend integrations. And what we'll see is that gets added down here to the revision history. So before we started this demonstration, I snapshotted it to a version 4.0. So you can see if I select that now we no longer have the elements that we drew during this demonstration in the upper right hand corner. If I select version 4.1, you can see there it is. So if I go back in time to version 4 and go ahead and revert, once I deselect this yellow bar indicating we're looking at an immutable snapshot and look at the current version of the application in flight, we can see it no longer has those shapes in the upper right hand corner. If I select version 4.1 and revert it back to the tip of our development stream, now I can see that I have everything that we've developed since we started this. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to actually two process designers. So let me double click this and switch to two process designers. And the top half is me, Bill Hahn. You can see my name in the title bar up here in the upper left. And I can see other members of my team that are connected to this process model. So I can see Ray is online and he's working with a variety of things. Ray, who normally wouldn't be on my screen here, I'm just showing two instances of the process designer. Ray would probably be in another building in our organization. Ray can see that I'm online and see that I'm pretty busy. So now, because we're connected to the same process model, we have a shared model architecture. When I start drawing shapes in this, we can see that Ray sees that someone is editing, Bill is editing this, and he's instantaneously, dynamically locked in read-only mode so that he can't accidentally change it while I'm editing it. And as soon as I save my work, then he sees the changes. Let's see that again. When Ray makes a connection here and saves it, Bill can see the changes. When Bill adds a shape to the diagram and connects it up and saves those changes, Ray can see it. So we can dynamically collaborate, real-time collaboration between two or more members of the team seamlessly because we're sharing the same process model. And we can actually work on multiple elements and multiple levels of the process application simultaneously. We don't lock one another out. So parallel development or simultaneous development with real-time collaboration is very feasible. So that's a good example of how we're actually sharing the same process model. Now, if I go ahead and log on to the process portal and take a look at this from an end user point of view, one of the things we notice is that because we're sharing the same process model, even end users can see the new elements that we drew in here, at least in development and test mode. We might lock that down and roll it out in a methodical fashion with versions so that it doesn't affect a production system on the fly. But in development mode, this can be very, very useful. So as we take a look at the shared model in the center of our full life cycle for rapid, agile, and iterative development, it truly is very dynamic. Thank you for watching.